Hey guys, it is Doa. I'm back with more IPL in the afternoon. Today is Build Order Breakdown, and that is, of course, a show where we take a game from one of the previous IPL broadcasts, be it Fight Club or Team Arena Challenge or something like that, and we break it down. We take a look at the build orders that their players are using, the strategies that they're using. It began as sort of my way to sort of look at build orders specifically, but it's kind of turned into this sort of like me just getting to have a little bit of fun analyzing a game to a certain extent too. But it's something that I don't really get to do and be like vocal about a whole lot. So I don't know, I'm just having a lot of fun with it. I thought, if I'm doing this, why not stream it anyway and then have chat open. I've got my laptop right here so I can see chat. And so if you guys have any questions to me, ask them, and ideally I will be looking over and seeing them. I may see them, I may not, but I will try to look over as often as I can so that I can talk to you and interact with you guys, because you're awesome, because you're watching my show. So thank you very much for joining us. But today, and by us I mean me, apparently it's the plural me today. So we are going to be looking at very late game Terran versus Protoss. And just give me 1 second to log into StarCraft 2 here. I did not get a chance to do that before the show because we actually had to replace a webcam. So that's a lot of fun, really, when you're about to go live and then something just breaks and doesn't work. Luckily, we've got extra stuff. I think we've got the extra. Yeah, here it is. This is the troublemaker. This is why we're delayed right now, because of this piece of equipment here. Normally, we use something a little bit more technologically advanced, but we're doing some stuff at E3 this week, so a lot of our equipment is being shipped down there right now. So we're left with a bit of a bare-bones setup for you this week, but it still should be pretty good. You shouldn't notice that much of a difference anyway. Waiting for this replay to load. But basically, what we're going to look at today, it's going to be a game from Fight Club that was on Monday. It was broadcast on Monday originally. It was Kevin Naki and Jorasar, one of our community casters, that broadcast that. And it was a very, very good TvP matchup. Creator Prime ended up winning. And I went through some of the replays today to try to find a good late-game TvP, right? Because that's kind of what everybody's been talking about lately, right? It's all about TvP. It's about how Terrans can't win late-game TvP and how Protoss is overpowered and all that. And various things where, we've even had some people from Blizzard say things like, well, Terran, they excel at the mid-game, right? So then that means in that matchup that Terran needs to do damage in the mid-game, and if they're not, then they're a bad Terran and they deserve to lose the late game. That's kind of paraphrasing, but that's to a certain extent a little bit of the sense that we're getting, from the community, maybe a little bit from Blizzard, things like that. There's some things that people really aren't considering, though, and is that right now a lot of Protoss players are playing for the late game specifically. So at that mid-game time where Terran appears to be so strong, part of the factor that goes into that is that Protoss just doesn't really have as many units, right? Because they're playing a little bit more defensively, they're attacking a little bit more aggressively, they're going for upgrades very aggressively. So all of this kind of adds to Terran being stronger at that point in the game anyway, because Terran is trying to do damage, Protoss is trying to kind of pull back and be defensive and play for that really late game situation. So it's not just that Terran is good in the mid game, Protoss is good in the late game. There's other factors in the current metagame that kind of go into it a little bit, right? So that's going to be something we're kind of going to consider as we watch this replay. And I should stop talking and actually go into the game, shouldn't I? Because we're actually pressed on time. We've only got about 35 minutes right now because we're starting this about 15 minutes late here. And we need to start Team Arena Challenge 3 on time, of course. And you don't want to miss that. It's going to be Eclipsia versus Dignitas. These guys are going to be fighting for elimination. Whoever loses is done with the tournament. So without much further ado, let us go into the game and unpause that. And I'm going to look over at my stream here just to kind of make sure everything went. Okay, perfect. So here we go. This is the map Atlantis Spaceship. And at the top of it, in the red, we have our Protoss player in this Fight Club match from the Team Prime. It is Creator Prime, an excellent PV tier, a very, very good PV tier, in fact. And down at the bottom of the map, in the blue, from the Team TSL, is a very good TvPer, Terran versus Protoss. It is Polt. And Polt is actually a good friend of mine. He's a great Terran player, speaks impeccable English, and is definitely one of the most unique Terrans out there right now. He's got a very, very cool style of playing all of his matchups, and we're going to be kind of paying more closely attention to him. I know I did the build order breakdowns right now. I've kind of gone Protoss, Terran, Zerg, and now we're going back to Terran to a certain extent again. But so this time I'm going to try to focus on both. We're going to take a look at what Creator Prime is doing as well. just as much as Polt. But instead of looking at one player specifically, like we do sometimes on this show in previous episodes, instead what we're going to do is sort of look at both players and see how both kind of progress through the game. So normally I would be pausing quite a bit and talking about various little things, this and that, but today, because I know this game is a little bit longer, I'm going to just show the replay bar here. It's actually about 27 minutes long. So this is going to use up most of our time here that we have left today. So not going to be doing as much pausing. I've got my eye on the clock as well. And yeah, like I said, if at any time you have questions for me or anything like that, type them in chat, and I will definitely attempt to look at that and answer. So yeah, let's make this interactive. I want to hang out with you guys. It's part of this, right? So we're going to watch this replay together, see what we can learn about StarCraft 2. We do see the command center first from Polt going down, and then a little bit of good harassment from Creator Prime, just kind of forcing Polt to do a little bit of repairing, pull that extra SCV. Absolutely no reason why you don't want to do this as a Protoss player. You want to get in and really kind of hinder your opponent as much as possible. You can't really do that to Protoss as much unless you block it with an engineering bay or something crazy like that, but that's not quite as common. So we do see Nexus first from Creator Prime, followed by that gateway. And things are progressing fairly normally. Lozka, or maybe that's Illozka. I don't know if that's a capital I at the start, or if it's just another lowercase l. It's hard to tell. But when you come to the UK in the future, I would absolutely love to travel to Europe on some StarCraft-related thing, or even not StarCraft-related things. There's a lot of awesome stuff to see in Europe. But I have no plans in the near future. Maybe if I'm lucky enough, I'll end up at a DreamHack or an IEM or something like that in the future. I'd love to go, certainly. And, of course, visit the UK as well. So we'll see, maybe. But, yeah, very fast second gas from Creator as well. We're going to see Creator Prime play in a very Creator Prime way, right? I loved it. No, this is not a rebroadcast. It's actually live. That's right. We're looking at this game live right now. It's not being played live. Obviously, we've got the replay bar open here, but I'm talking about it live. So, surprise. Hooray. And we do have the two command centers coming up right now, orbital commands, that is a little bit more probe harassment, trying to force those SCVs to bounce around on the minerals. But yeah, like I was saying, we're going to see Creator Prime play in a very Creator Prime style, right? And what does that mean? When we say Creator Prime style, what are we talking about? Well, basically, Creator Prime was one of the first Korean players to really adopt and polish the style that some North American players like to use. The double forge style, the very passive, late-game oriented Protoss versus Terran style. I prefer to go back and credit In Control actually with this. A lot of players on NA were doing this, but for some reason In Control actually pops out in my mind as one of the players that were doing a lot of the early versions of this double forge build that a lot of Protoss players do. And actually, now that I said it, I'm trying to remember if Creator Prime actually does go for double forge in this or not. If he doesn't, that's going to be embarrassing. But basically, it's a style that kind of popped up in the West and then was adopted and perfected by Korean players, such as Creator Prime. Now, on the other side of the map, we've got two gases going down for Polt, and he is going for a very Polt thing to do. He is going for 4 barracks very, very quickly, going to be getting a lot of upgrades, a lot of big, heavy army units early on, Marines and Marauders with upgrades. He loves doing this. If you're kind of new to the way that Polt plays, he loves to be very aggressive. He loves to have lots and lots of units to work with, to attack on multiple fronts with multiple prongs, and this is a great opening to do that with. You stay very, very safe against a lot of early gateway pressures that Protoss tend to do. Oh, and look at this, Creator Prime actually going for a third Nexus really, really fast, going for that after his first gate. I believe it was Nexus, Gate, Nexus on this game. And so he's going to be getting a lot of stuff in terms of probes very, very early. We do have more gateways going down. Generally, Protoss players have kind of enjoyed getting 6 to 8 gateways, 8 being a little bit more all-in-ish, 5 to 6 being a little bit more aggressive, but still leaving room for tech. So yeah, in this case, we're seeing, looks like 7 gateways going up for Creator Prime here. Wow, 7 gateways. That is a lot of gateways. So the idea with this is that, okay, let's actually pause for a moment and talk about this, because we've got Polt moving out with a little bit of a pressure here because he's got, 4 barracks. He's been making Marines for a while, and he's also getting Stim right now, so no upgrades, just a little bit of pressure to kind of scope out what's going on the map, get a little bit of map control. But let's talk about this for a second as we see these probes transferring here to this third Nexus. about why Creator Prime is doing this, because this isn't an opening that Creator Prime used to do quite a bit. This is relatively new in StarCraft 2. It's only been around for a couple months or so that people have really started doing it in competitive play, right? We've got a large amount of gateways after a very, very fast third nexus, right? That's kind of what we're seeing here. So why would a Protoss player want to do that? Well, the answer is because most Terran players right now, not Polt in this game, which is going to be an important factor, I think, but most Terran players prefer to go for 3 barracks, then a factory, and then medevacs, right? You're going for bio with medevac composition fairly early on, be mobile, do drops, things like that. It's a great composition. It's very standard in Terran versus Protoss, so most Terrans tend to do that. Now, Protoss players, and we first saw this, I believe, the first time we saw this in the GSL was parting against some Terran on Daybreak. I can't remember who it was against actually now, but some Terran on Daybreak, and he went for an 8-gate off of 3 nexuses. And the idea is that you do damage to them early on, right? Because you know that they expand it early. If they're on 3 barracks, then you're going to have 7 or 8 gateways to their 3 barracks. You'll have sentries, you'll have zealots, you'll even have some stalkers a lot of times, and you'll just be able to overwhelm them, right? Sometimes you can even win the game, we've seen in the GSL and other tournaments as well. We've seen it on IPL a couple times. So this style that Creator Prime is doing right now, this heavy gateway style early on after this very fast third nexus, is a response to the standard play that Terrans have been doing, which is that 3 barracks play. So to a certain extent, I feel like this is another way for Protosses to try to get past that quote-unquote weakness that they have in the mid-game against Terran. And I, like I said before we started looking at the game, I personally don't really think that Protoss are weak against Terran in the mid-game. I believe that the current metagame that Protoss are choosing to pursue makes them a little bit more vulnerable. But as a race, I don't believe that Protoss is weaker or anything like that. So that's just kind of my opinion there. Take it or leave it, but the evidence seems to suggest it in my eyes. So, yeah, we've got Polt moving out right there. Let's unpause it here. And so he's got 4 barracks, right? Which is actually very good against what Creator Prime is doing. Instead of 3 barracks worth of units, Polt's going to have quite a bit more. And as you can see, he's scouting around the map right now. Does he see this probe? I actually didn't cast this game. Oh, look at that. Wow. Lucky Polt there. Creator Prime does get the cancel, but Polt kills the probe, which is going to actually help him out a lot. He's actually throwing down that 3rd command center, too. I watched this game a couple times in replays and looked at it, but there's going to be little things that I haven't noticed before because I actually didn't cast this. This was Kevin Naki and Jorosar that did this Fight Club. So a little bit of this I'm seeing for the first time. And Creator Prime loses that probe, and he has this robo going down as well. He only put down 7 gateways as well, so he wasn't planning on going all in off of 8 gates or anything like that, but he definitely wants to get the robo out after seeing all those Marines, wants to know what his opponent's doing. And here's that gateway pressure that a lot of Protoss players do tend to kind of go into, right, with this. Some decent force fields trapping some units, but because of this 4 barracks opening, Polt has plenty to handle this, right? He's not going to be too worried. We're going to see a warp in from Creator Prime after the pylon finishes. He's got 7 gates, keep in mind. He's got an observer, a couple observers on the way. That's actually very smart. Now with the 30-second build time for observers and the and chrono boost, you can get them out very, very quickly. No reason at all in the world not to get 2 of them right away unless it's like a crazy situation PvP and you absolutely need your immortal right away. And so, yeah, Creator Prime just pokes for a moment, sees that Polt is well set up, even though he only has 1 bunker. And that is about it. Oh, a little bit of a fail on the force fields from Creator Prime there. He left a gap that a lot of units got through, but overall didn't do too well or too badly. Oh, look at that. There's a little gap for units to get through there. So Polt, as you can see, with his superior unit numbers, because of these 4 barracks, is going to be able to push Creator Prime back. So we're not going to worry too much about the fights. Remember, this isn't a cast per se. This is a oh yeah, I need to do a little bit of aggression here, but this isn't a cast per se. This is more of just kind of looking at the game and see what we can see. And another thing that you see quite a bit with these 4 barracks are the 2 engineering bays. So after that engagement, let's pause it again, right? All right, we've got double upgrades going up for Polt right now. We've got 1 forge already started. We've got a 2nd forge actually starting right now. There they are. So there's the double forges for Creator Prime. So again, moving into more of that standard Creator Prime style, only starting out with this big gateway force early on. And I like this a lot. I think this really addresses a lot of the, again, quote-unquote, weakness that Protoss has been kind of feeling in the early parts of the game, that they've just kind of had a hard time handling those big biopressures. Well, if you have a ton of gateways and you have 3 bases, you're going to be able to do a little bit better on this. Now, a lot of people would say, after hearing what I just said, they would say, well, Doa, a lot of these maps aren't big enough for Protoss to go for 3 Nexuses, man. I mean, they can get 2 in the early game. Maybe, maybe if they go Nexus first, that's even a little bit dangerous, right? But the fact is that there's other things you can do, too. Oh, am I not on busy? Axlive comes online. There we go. Don't want to get any whispers or anything like that while I do my show. Like I said, we had to replace our webcam before the show and everything, so it was a bit crazy. But basically, yeah. So Creator Prime using the map, again, to try to, tailor his build to do well against what Polt does, and Polt responding very well, I think, with choosing to go for this 4 barracks opening as well. Kind of stalemating things to a certain extent. Polt really can't do damage to Creator Prime, but Creator Prime in this case can't really do damage to Polt. So we are going to go into that later game TvP situation. So let's unpause and check that out a little bit. We've got the first Colossus on the way right now for Creator Prime. He's got plenty of observers out. If we look at the unit station, he's got 3. That's a good amount. If it was parting, he'd have like 10. People think I'm joking, but it's not a joke. He actually did have 10 observers out at one time in a game I saw at IPL 4, I believe it was. It was pretty crazy, yeah. Let's see. So, just to kind of continue looking at everything that's going on here, continuing to sort of take stock of what Polt is, or not what Polt is doing, what Creator Prime is doing, going up to 8 gateways here, and he's also got these 2 forges. So if we look at the upgrades here, Polt slightly ahead. It's not going to make that big of a difference. There's not going to be a whole lot of timings where Polt's going to be able to be like, yes, I have 2-2 before you have 2-2 for like 15 seconds. Let's do this. Polt's not going to be able to keep track of these upgrades well enough, obviously, to execute timings like this. So it's not going to make a big difference, really. The big deal in this is that Polt is going for these double upgrades. But again, this is a very Polt style of playing, right? Lots of barracks. Look at this. Tons of barracks right now. We've got, let's see, 8 barracks up already at the 12-minute mark. And again, it's because of this very quick third as well. And Polt's one of those few Terrans out there that is not afraid to go to that late game situation. He's confident in his unit control. Another thing that you'll notice with Polt is that, with TSL Polt, is that he will get his Ghost Academy very, very late. And the reason for that is because, again, he just relies so much on his unit control. It's almost, to a certain extent, a little bit SKMC-esque in that MC, tends to rely a lot farther on his unit control than a lot of Protosses will choose to do. And look at this, we have a little bit of a multi-pronged attack coming in from Polt, pressuring this third, while also going after this robotics bay and a robotics facility. And does he get it? Wow, he actually does. Very nice from Polt. Remember, I haven't actually watched these games too closely, really. I skimmed through it to try to find a game for today to do. I wanted to do something late game TvP, but I didn't skim it too quickly, because I kind of like seeing things on the fly here. It's kind of fun for me. So we have Creator Prime responding, making another Robo facility, obviously, and then also going for Storm, too. If your opponent's going Bio for a long time, you can see that they're not getting Ghosts for quite a while. Generally, Storm is going to be a pretty safe bet. Let's take a look at the Observer for Creator Prime. What has he seen so far? Actually, not a lot. Wow, I'm surprised. I would have expected Creator Prime to be a little bit more diligent about his scouting. He could gain so much information from just flying over Polt's base just once. So that is a bit of a surprise, I gotta say. I'm a little bit shocked, Creator Prime. A little bit shocked and disappointed, even. I'm kind of sad. Oh, well. And, yeah, Creator Prime, someone brings up saying that his macro isn't good, going up to 1,800, 1,700 minerals. I don't think it's necessarily that so much. Right now, Creator Prime wants to be spending his money more on expensive units, but he's a little bit low on gas, so naturally his minerals are going to get a little bit higher here, right? But he's also waiting for opportunities to warp in large round of Zealots to deal with drops and things too. So this is not maybe ideal, but not really terribly abnormal as well. You can see Polt's money getting a little bit high too, because both of these guys are engaged in these drops. And this is a pretty good drop for Polt. He's killing a lot of units. He's doing a pretty decent job here. He's not going to probably get either the Forges or the Templar Archives, but at least he gets some scouting information. There's also a fight going on down here as well, which Polt is losing. But if you look at the supply count right now, check that out. As we see things go by on the screen, ignore that for a moment, if you will. Look at the supply. Polt keeping up with Creator Prime, even though it really looked like he lost this in kind of a one-sided fashion, right? I mean, his army got destroyed by Storm and Colossi, yet he's still ahead in supply. He's still keeping up, definitely. So let's pause it for just a second here. Let's take a look at things. We're maybe about a little over halfway done with our replay, so we can kind of slow things down a little bit more, I guess, in this case. I was kind of rushing a little bit because we got started a little bit late, but we can kind of slow it down now. It should be fine. We're to the part of the game that I wanted to talk about anyway, which is the late game, TvP late game, right? So let me see. Let's take a look at where both players are at. We're at about the 16-minute mark, and in most professional games, right, you've got the late game, which starts around 15-minute mark or so like that, and I feel like if it gets to the 20-minute mark in Blizzard minutes, then you're to the late game, and we're going to get there. You can see this replay is 27 minutes long, so we're going to get to the late game, in my opinion, for this matchup here. So if we look around, we've still got these double engineering bays going. They're working on 2-2 right now, which is keeping up perfectly fine with Creator Prime's 2-2. In fact, if you look at the production queue, it's the same. They're actually at about the same level as far as that goes. Both players are taking a fourth base. In fact, the fourth bases, if we look at, are about the same level. If we look at the units right now, the supply at about the same level. So everything right now for these two players is about the same, which is actually very, very interesting. In terms of TvP, right? We've got a Terran player keeping up on bases, keeping up on upgrades, and that's allowing him to really kind of be competitive, right? A lot of Terran players in TvP try to have timing pushes, right? They're trying to like hit certain timings. I just got my ghosts out. Let's hit a timing where I can use EMP. I'm hitting 2-2. Let's hit a timing so I can use 2-2. But Polt is kind of just saying, I'm just going to play a long game. I know what your plan is, Creator. I know that you're actually just going to play more or less passive, that you're going to do the double forge thing. You're going to play like you always play, like you're so good at, and I'm just going to match you for that. Polt's got the macro to handle that, and he's also got the multitasking to handle that. So he doesn't need to really worry about timings too specifically in this particular game. He's just going to keep up with Creator Prime and be willing to go to the late game. So if we unpause this here, we'll be able to see in a little bit how Polt will handle that late game PvP, because Creator Prime, he's already got everything he needs for really superior late game Protoss versus Terran. He's got Colossi out, he's got Templar out, he's got Storm, he's got the ability to make Archons, he's getting his upgrades, he's starting 3-3 right now, so he's prepared, right? He's got that late game Protoss army that everyone is so terrified of. Let's see, I see a question in chat. I'll try to look over as much as I can. What's the worker count of Polt to support those barracks? That's a great question. Let's pause it again for a second and take a look at that. We've got 73 SCVs, which is good. That's actually really, really good. 73 is a perfect amount for 3 bases. Usually around 70-ish is great. He's going to be mining out his main at about the same time as 4th finishes too, so he's going to be able to transfer over there. Polt really doesn't need to make all that many more SCVs unless he starts losing some, or if he wants to use some to buffer an attack a little bit. So Polt, again, I'm really glad chat brought that up, honestly, because this is a great point to think about. I was just talking to Infinity 7 Axlav the other day about this, a very good Protoss player, and one of the things that he and I talked about was just how few SCVs Terran players really make in a game. They rely so much on mules, and yeah, Polt does have mules out as well, but Terran players in general, even at the pro level, aren't very good at making workers. And if you don't believe me, watch Terran players play. I mean, just pick a tournament, pick any player, and most players, aside from the very, very, very top ones, like the MVPs, the Marine Kings, the Polts, the Jockgees, aside from the very, very top Terrans, they generally don't make a lot of SCVs, right? Which I think is another thing that makes Terran a little bit weaker in the late game versus Protoss, right? Because if you lose those SCVs because you haven't been making that very many, because you're a little bit down already, right? You've got an even bigger deficit then in the late game. You'll run out of resources even quicker. So that is a great thing to kind of consider here as we watch this game, is the fact that Polt is keeping up on SCVs. He's not just relying on mules, right? And we're actually going to see one of the interesting things about this game is that Polt goes with a very, very low orbital command count. you see so many Terran players just spamming orbital commands, right? They're like, I want a bunch of mills, I want a bunch of scans, I want to have all this. But Polt, I could be wrong, but I don't believe Polt actually gets above 3 orbital commands for this entire 27-minute TvP. That's insane, man. That's way less command centers than you would normally see, right? So, but the reason why Polt can get away with that is because he's not so reliant on mules and energy. He's got enough SCVs to handle that, right? So let's kind of take a look at what we're seeing here again from both players. Both of them maxed out right now. Yeah, Creator Prime could make one more supply of unit, but whatever, he's maxed out. Both of them are working on 3-3. Creator's going to finish a little bit earlier. Gets a nice storm on this drop. Polt was going to drop the main, but that didn't work out. Creator Prime did see it. Now, while this is all going on, look at this. Polt's attacking here. Let's actually pause it again for a second. Polt attacking here, being active here, keeping Creator Prime's army active here, and what is he doing behind all this? Now, a lot of Terran players, this would be it, right? They'd be just attacking on multiple fronts. They'd be trying to do damage to Protoss. Let's do damage to Protoss, right? So we can win the game. But behind all this, Polt is throwing up another command center, right? He's getting ready to transfer workers to this one. It's almost a planetary. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if in just a couple seconds here, he decides to transfer some SCVs. That's boring, so we're not going to watch it, but it's probably going to happen. And we see Creator Prime kind of pushing around Polt here. He does have to split up his army a little bit as well. And Polt, just kind of being annoying, right? Just being aggressive, forcing Creator Prime to stay on his side of the map. So this is a very different sort of late game Terran versus Protoss that we normally see, right? At this point in the game, at like the 19-20 minute mark, let's think for a second. What are the type of engagements that we normally see in Terran versus Protoss? Well, what we see a lot of is big armies clashing together with lots of spells, right? Lots of spell casting. You've got Protoss trying to storm, you've got Terran trying to EMP, and then basically whoever spell casting is a little bit better, then they kind of win the game. That's generally how a lot of TvPs go, right? But Polt's playing things very differently. He's playing things in his own style. Yeah, he's getting ghosts, but look at this. Mobius Reactor at the 1930 mark? That's really late, but Polt is fine with that, right? He's fine with that because he's active around the map, but just more than that, he's keeping up on his macro. He's taking more bases. He's forcing Creator Prime to move around how he prefers it, right? Creator Prime isn't able to just muscle his way in with this army and do damage. He has to kind of sit back and defend quite a bit. Now he is coming to this side of the map, so what is Polt going to do? If we look at Polt, he's got a little bit smaller of an army here. He pulls back to the planetary. Brilliant move here, and look at this. The Vikings up on the high ground. Let's pause for a second to look at this battle, right? Besides it looking awesome, because StarCraft 2 looks awesome. Look at that. That's so cool, isn't it? Doesn't that look sweet? But look at this. Let's look at the positioning for Polt. This is what really sets Polt apart from a lot of other Terran players, I think. Look at the positioning here. We've got the Vikings here on the high ground, more or less. We've got, well, some on the high ground. I guess this really isn't high ground per se, but Vikings in a pretty good position where it's harder for Stalkers to get in and to hit them. Going after the Colossi, perfect, right? Colossi are shooting at the planetary. They're not even going after the bio. The bio, in the meantime, as we can see here, has been pulled back behind the mineral line for the most part. Yeah, there's a couple right here, right? But for the most part, it's pulled back to a defensive position behind the planetary, and Creator Prime attacks into it. A lot of Protoss players would do this as well. They'd be like, hey, you know what? I've got the big army. I can just push them around. But Polt, with his positioning, is able to force Creator Prime back. Look at that. Takes out the Colossi, forces away the army, and ends up with a supply lead in an engagement that a lot of other Terran players may have lost, right? So this is another reason why Polt can actually get away with getting his ghosts very late and things like that, is because he's so good at picking his engagements, knowing where and when to fight, right? He let Creator Prime come to this side of the map so that he can pull him back and have him engage at the planetary, things like that, pull him away from this space. Now, has Creator Prime seen the space? No, not quite yet, because Polt's kind of pulled all his attention to this area, right? Now, Creator Prime should scout this fairly soon. In fact, if I had any sort of, big criticism for Creator Prime this game, I feel like he hasn't scouted as well as he has in other games. I mean, if we look at this, Creator Prime really hasn't seen very much of the base. He hasn't seen this base at all. He's usually better than this. He's usually better, in my opinion, at scouting. So I think that's one of the factors in this game that kind of hurt him a little bit. And it is a best of 9, so when you're playing a long, kind of grueling series like that, it is a little bit difficult to kind of keep up everything. But overall, Creator Prime could have been a little bit better with the scouting, and that may have made a difference here. But if we look at the game again right now, to kind of look at the state of the game, if you will, I guess you could say, we've got Creator Prime doing very normal Protoss things, trying to do these zealot attacks here. which aren't working very well. Polt able to micro just fine. No worries there while he builds up an army. So Creator Prime still playing well, taking another base, harassing at the third, building up his army, staying relatively safe against drops. He's got a Templar here to feed back. No cannons or anything, so this is a little bit more vulnerable, but he's almost to the point where he doesn't really need his forges anymore, right? He's getting shield upgrades, but if this gets sniped, it's not the end of the world. It's a bit of an unfortunate thing, but it's not the end of the world. Doing a little bit of scouting with these Stalkers, and he will finally see this planetary as well that he hadn't seen up until this point, unfortunately. And so now he's like, all right, Polt was on less bases, or on more bases than I thought he would. That's going to be a bit of a problem. So, yeah. And so let's see. Coffee links the solution to late game TvP. Be godlike. To a certain extent, yeah. I know I'm using Polt. He's awesome in TvP, yeah. But I think he gives us a good example of what to aspire to be. As Terran versus Protoss players, right? We don't need to conform to what everybody says about the matchup right now. A lot of people are saying, oh, Terrans just need to be aggressive in the mid game, right? Because that's the only time you can do damage. If it gets to late game, oh no, Protoss is OP in the late game. We don't want that to happen. So even though I certainly don't have the control in the macro that Polt does, probably nobody on the stream that's watching this has that. Probably very few people in the world have the macro and control that Polt does in TvP. But it gives us an example of what to aspire to be, right? You don't need to be Polt to win in late game TvP. You just need to try to emulate some of the things he does. Look at this, very limited ghost usage late in the game. 19 ghosts. He's got a decent amount, but they came very, very late, and now he can use them to a certain extent to kind of pull a little bit of a surprise on Creator, right? He wasn't expecting that. Creator Prime, though, does a good little move here. Takes out that planetary, no problem. Polt trying to force him away here. Other good Viking positioning as well. And the Vikings do, I believe, have, +2 air attacks. So they are going to rip through those Colossi very quickly. Overall, though, Creator Prime does more or less win this fight. But Polt comes out okay. Actually, no, Polt actually wins the fight. Never mind. Like I said, I haven't really watched this game terribly closely. I just kind of skimmed through it to see if it was the type of game that I kind of wanted to look at. And luckily it is. So now Polt is down a base, right? Still up on supply. Still got crazy production going. He's got a ton of barracks. He's got his upgrades. So he's ready again to move into potentially a little bit more of an aggressive phase in this game, right? So we're going to see if he does that. Has a good amount of Vikings. Oh, another thing I want to kind of take note of, and I'm going to pause it again for a second with this as well, is we look at the unit count right here. We've got 15 Vikings, 8 Marauders, 10 Marines, 8 Ghosts, right? So his supply is a little bit lower. He did just take a lot of damage. But if we look at the ratio here, now he didn't really lose a lot of Vikings in that last engagement. So the Vikings are at kind of optimal, I think, ratio, right? This is about how many Vikings I think you would want to have in later game TvP, right? If you go less than this, the Colossi are going to do too much damage in general. If you go more than this, then yeah, you're going to kill the Colossi really quickly, but then you're just going to have an inferior bio force against their larger gateway force, larger gateway Templar Archon force, right? And we do see that's kind of what Creator Prime has. He is adding on some DTs, but that's not such a huge deal. And let's actually look at the energy that Polt has built up on these command centers real quick in relation to the DTs. He's got a scan on every single one of them, in fact. And the reason is, keep in mind, his SCV count, aside from losing the ones right here, was very high just a moment ago, right? So those mules aren't quite as necessary. He can actually save some of those for scans, get by on spending less money on orbitals. Less money on command centers and orbital commands means more production out of these barracks, right? More barracks to produce with, which creates a strong late-game Terran versus Protoss army. So another thing that Polt does that's just slightly different. You see, TvP, what Polt's doing right now in TvP isn't that much different from everybody else, right? It's just a little bit different. It's just a little bit more refined, I think. I think Polt has a little bit better grasp on the principles of TvP than a lot of Terrans do. And this is a good example of it. Now, you've got other players that make just a ton of ghosts, and I think that's a good avenue to explore in late-game TvP as well, is just a ton of ghosts to get tons of EMPs and tons of snipes as well. But that's kind of a different story. That's not really what we're looking at right now today. And look at that. Again, the Colossi just melting really, really quickly. The Vikings not taking a lot of damage, and Polt's able to come in with a relatively small force and scare this away, right? Creator Prime not quite able to handle it. And so he has to play a little bit more defensive. I do like the addition of a Dark Shrine that he did as well. I don't know where it went, but he did add a Dark Shrine on, and he's also producing off of, well, it was 3 Robos for a little while. This is going to be the final fight for Polt. He's got the Colossi down, so he can land his Vikings. Finish off the rest of the army. GG from Crater Prime, and Polt wins this very long late-game TvP on Atlantis spaceship, right? And yeah, look at the supply difference, 158 to 81. That's kind of how a lot of the ends of the games look, right? But it's still kind of cool. Now, Borst1 asks, is he still on 8 barracks while he was, like he was when he saturated his 3rd? That's a good question. I believe he maybe added a few more. Let's see. He's on 8 barracks. Did he add any more? You know, he may actually just be on 8 barracks. Yeah. In fact, I believe he is. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's something to definitely take note of. Actually, no, he's not just on 8 barracks, is he? Yeah, he is. Yeah, 8 barracks. Okay. So Polt, in this type of strategy that he likes to do, I'll have to watch more of his games and see if he sticks on 8 barracks or if he goes up to more in certain games if he happens to get more bases up and running. But basically, 8 barracks is a good number to produce ghosts with. Obviously, you've got then 2 reactored starports for either a lot of Vikings or to get your medevac count back up really quickly as well. No nukes or anything like that, so just 1 Ghost Academy, I believe. There it is, yep. And so Polt kind of showing us how it's done in TvP to a certain extent. Very, very cool stuff. So again, let's go back to the webcam. Whoops, I accidentally did that. I'm kind of an XSplit noob, I admit. In fact, I just set up my own stream last night for the first time. That was kind of cool. But let's recap, shall we? What did we see in that game? What allowed Polt to win that game? Well, there were a couple things. One is the opening. He went for the 4 barracks opening, right? Which is very good against a lot of the gateway pressure openings that Protoss players have been deciding to do. Now, one thing to keep in mind with that is that 4 barracks can potentially not work out that great in certain situations. If your opponent techs very quickly, you're going to be behind in that regard, obviously. So you kind of have to play it by ear, you know. Polt, just his style by himself, he likes to get a lot of barracks, things like that. So he kind of tends to lean towards that. But it seems like every build in StarCraft 2 has kind of a double-edged sword to it, you know? There's pros and cons. It's one of the things that makes StarCraft 2 so great, but it's also one of the things that makes StarCraft 2 so frustrating and hard to play as well sometimes, is that you've got this double-edged sword, right? You do this build, which is awesome in this position, and then, you know, not so great in this other position. So Polt kind of tends to err on the side of how he likes to play. He's a big Bioterran. This is just how he plays, right? Creator Prime knows that Polt likes to do that. Therefore, he goes for a big gateway opening. 3 Nexus, 7 gateways, a potential for a lot of early pressure on Polt early in the game. He doesn't decide to really do it. He puts a little bit of pressure on to kind of feel Polt out to a certain extent, to kind of see where he's at. Polt defends it easily with just 1 barracks, or 1 bunker, not 1 barracks. Yet 4 barracks, remember. So Creator Prime then goes into his teching, things like that. He's not 8 or 9 gate. He's not all in this case, so he's just fine as well. So that's the first part. Is the opening, I think, helped out Polt quite a bit. So later on, as we move into the game, Polt didn't really do a ton of damage, right, in the mid-game. There's that mid-game that everyone's saying, Terran must do damage, Terran must do damage in the mid-game. Polt really didn't do that. He tried to poke here and there, tried to drop a little bit, but really what he did more than be aggressive in that mid-game was get his upgrades going, do different sort of multi-pronged pushes, but not attacks, right? I kind of think of it as an attack as something where you go all the way and you're committed, you're going to fight to the last man, whereas a push is something where you just kind of move forward and see if you're going to be able to do damage there. And that's kind of what Polt was doing in that game. He moves forward, kind of feels it out. He's like, all right, doesn't look like I'm going to be able to quite get things done here. Pulls back without losing too many units. He does get a nice snipe on the robotics facility, but that's something that Creator Prime recovers from pretty quickly. Just makes another robo, loses like probably 1 Colossus worth of build time, which doesn't make a huge difference, right? So that's another thing that Polt does. Now, late in the game, what does Polt do to win the game then? How does he kind of use what he did earlier in the game, or his strategy overall, we'll say, to win that late-game TvP situation? Well, what he does is, again, just more of that solid pushing, more of kind of pulling apart Polt's Creator Prime's army. What's the big strength that Protoss has in the late game a lot? A lot of their strength comes from their Death Ball, right? The big Protoss army. So if you're a Terran player and you can just pull pieces off of it here and there, that taxes the multitasking of the player. It reduces the army. It's it's kind of the how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, right? You're not going to be able to take the whole thing on like a lot of Terran players try to do. They try to go in and EMP everything and get a concave and try to win the big fight. But Polt plays it much more smartly. He tries to peel little pieces off of the army and take it piece by piece until he reduces it to kind of a more manageable size. And also his impeccable positioning, too, when he decides to fight is something that helped him win that game. So to win a late game TvP against Crater Prime is quite a feat. Crater Prime is very, very good in the late game. So Polt should definitely be a Terran to study. If you're a Terran player that struggles in the late game with TvP, definitely watch Polt. He's got a lot of good ideas in that regard. He doesn't, by any means crush every Protoss he plays against. Nobody does, right? But he does well. In fact, I think Polt ended up actually losing that series to Creator Prime in the long run. But that game specifically was a great example of the potential that you can have as a Terran player in TvP, even on a big map, even in a late game TvP situation with the Protoss at the optimal unit composition, maxed out, plenty of bases, plenty of gas. He had the rich gas and everything, and Polt still won. So very, very cool stuff from TSL Polt, and I think we're going to have to end the show right there. And sorry I didn't look at the chat and get more questions done. That's something I'll try to be a little bit better at in the future. But thanks for watching, guys. What we're going to do is we're going to take down the stream for just a moment. So don't go anywhere. It's going to go down for just a second, but stay. Don't leave. And then it's going to come back up. We're going to have a countdown for Team Arena Challenge 3. And when we have that, we're going to have Kevin Naki standing right over there. And also Total Biscuit is in the studio. So he's going to do a little bit of casting with us as well. It's going to be Eclipsia versus Dignitas. Should be a lot of fun. So again, thanks for watching so much, guys. This has been Build Order Breakdown. Don't go anywhere. Stream's going to go on for just a second, but we'll be right back with Team Arena Challenge number 3.